how do we create a working environment that enhances people's lives rather than is sucking the life out of them?
Today I'll be chatting with an award-winning mental health first aid instructor.
How do we work that is healthy, but also how do we work that is unhealthy?
We'll be looking at how the workplace has changed since the lockdown.
And then you find people who are responding to emails at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, if not 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning.
And the impact that is having on both the young and the old in the workplace.
So what is it that is healthy within the workplace?
The theme for this season is Embracing Life's Tapestry, and my guest is Peter Larkham. So what happens to you to change you to become the person you are today?
What a great question. So, I suppose kind of my journey started back in 1997 when I got into youth work. So I started in youth work and getting to know young people. And through the time that I spent working alongside young people and volunteering in different youth organisations, I started my first professional youth work job in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and then started to focus in on emotional literacy with young people. So helping young people understand what you feel and understand why you feel like that, which sounds pretty simple, and yet most people never put the two pieces of information together, which means that most people will act and react to situations because that's the way they've always acted and reacted. And then it's not until someone comes along and says, but how does the situation make you feel? And do you want to keep feeling like that? And I started to see young people dramatically change their lives. And so back in 2009, I then set up my own company. And in that, I was focusing in the PS8CE curriculum in schools, which is basically everything you need to learn in life. And then I got a interview with a company who were delivering mental health training in the workplace. And I suddenly found myself delivering mental health training, but with this whole background of emotional literacy understanding, and had the two pieces of information together. And I was like, oh, I need more information. And it was that kickstarted me into the world of mental health and mental health training.
So I think what you're doing there, what you're talking about there is very interesting, to be quite honest, So if you were to sit down with a young John Burns who was in his early 20s at the time and say, now, John, tell me about your week that's just gone by. And I had to offload all my vulnerabilities to you. How would you help a person such as myself at that age to deal better with those situations where you're put on the spot or your weaknesses are exposed, I suppose you could say?
Wow. That's a great, tough questions, John. I suppose kind of because my role isn't a counsellor, I've got to be very careful not to slip into this kind of counselling role. But it's very much about that self-exploration, that self-understanding, I suppose. And I suppose kind of as a young man, kind of in an environment where you are regularly feeling vulnerable, the questions that I would be asking is, on that Sunday night, before you start your week, what are the feelings that come up then? Because I speak to a lot of people that have Sunday night dread, and that fear of being found out, or that fear of not being good enough, or all of those insecurities, which I think is incredibly common in the workplace at the moment. And it's those feelings of, okay, so do you want to keep feeling like that? Is that an emotion that pulls the energy away from you, or is it something that invigorates you? For some people, they have the get up and go, no, I'm going to overcome this, and it becomes a driving force. But it's still not a pleasant emotion to be experiencing on a regular basis. And so my question then is about how do we begin to look at elements in the week, people that we engage with, the tasks that we feel confident in. Now, there's definitely a place for pushing ourselves outside of the comfort zones, but there's also, firstly, I need to build my confidence so as I can push out into those more uncomfortable spaces. And so my question would be very much around, what do you enjoy? What time is spent with friends or family? What recharges you and enthuses you? Because for a lot of people, it may be that they need to change jobs, but for others, it's about finding those moments of time that begin to ignite and enthuse people in their everyday.
Yeah. So do you think that mental health issues are really prevalent in today's workforce, where we have so much conversations about diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion?
For sure. I mean, over the years, I've seen the conversation of mental health shift and change. So it used to be very much that mental health equaled mental health illnesses. That's how we spoke about it. That's how we viewed it. And now the conversation has shifted and moved to the understanding that we all have mental health, which means we all have good days and bad days. But part of our mental health journey is also recognizing if we have a good day or a bad day. But also, if we start having more bad days than good, where the help and support is. And I think with the whole conversation about inclusion and diversity, neurodiversity that's kind of kicking off a lot, and how do we create a working environment that enhances people's lives rather than is sucking the life out of them. There's a lot of conversation at the moment around the culture within our workspace. So what is it that is healthy within the workplace? How do we work that is healthy? But also, how do we work that is unhealthy? And how do we begin to eradicate those things that are potentially causing or contributing to poor mental health and put in some protections and some boundaries, so as there is a healthier work-life balance, especially in this hybrid working world where we are working from home. So where are the boundaries there? How do we begin to give ourselves the shut-off time that our brains need at the end of the day, middle of the day, beginning of the day? Because for a lot of people, the first thing they check in the morning is their phone and their emails, and the last thing they check at night is their phone and their email. And then you find people who are responding to emails at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, if not 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. And this is really unhealthy, but it becomes an acceptable culture if we're not careful.
Yeah. Another thing that's in the news of recent, of course, and it's quite prevalent in America and in Western Europe, where you have xenophobia, I suppose. It's on the rise again. And if you take, for example, countries like Italy, Germany, for example, probably even the UK to a lesser extent, where you have aging populations and there's a need to bring skilled workers into those countries to overcome the issue of labour shortages. And now you're seeing, for example, the rise of xenophobia. What sort of advice would you give to people who are in those situations where they have high levels of skills, qualifications, and they could be facing xenophobic attacks in the workplace?
That's a very difficult question to answer. And in any workplace, you don't want to have any fear. Fear is a really bad motivator. And so to have a fear or to have a phobia of any form within the workplace, whether it's been fueled by other people or whether it's been fueled simply by our internal opinions and thoughts, is never a healthy place to be. And I think in those examples, we need to be looking much more around how we open up more conversations, how we begin to move this from something that seems to be happening in the shadows to an open conversation. What we've seen with the whole neurodiversity conversation is, rather than it being kind of pushed into the shadows, it's being brought out and talked about a lot more and understood a lot more. And if it is there in the workplace, we need to eradicate it from the workplace. It is an unhealthy, unhelpful environment for people to be in and to be experiencing. And so how do we begin to open up the conversations and begin to challenge the current working process or the environments that are going on in the background? But that's a difficult thing to do. And I think also we've got to really understand that we are tackling a working world and a lifestyle which is expecting and wanting instant changes. And for things like that, it's not an instant fix. It's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of effort. But the hardest part is getting started. If we don't start by asking the difficult questions, we are never going to find the potential answers or solutions.
When you meet a person who is suffering from mental health issues, whether it's work-related or family-related, do you recommend that they take on journaling to try and get them to start putting pen to paper about how they feel in a certain situation, what caused those fears?
I would say journaling is a great tool, and there are lots of tools out there to be using. I think for some people, using the journaling or the creative writing is really helpful. For other people, it's the talking therapies and actually having someone that they can talk to on a regular basis. For other people, it's just get up, get out, go for a walk, get some fresh air, get some headspace, and just ponder and think and process. And so I think for the people that I work with and the people that I support, it's actually trying to offer and provide a plethora, what a word, a plethora of tools so as they can find the things that work for them. And yes, for some people it's journaling. But I think with journaling in particular, the journaling is actually looking at the journey that you've been on. So actually look back at the last few hours, not just kind of how you're feeling there. Look to see if there are any specific triggers or if there are any specific events that have happened that may be kind of triggering the feelings and the emotions that you're then experiencing a few hours later or a day or two later. So it really is a much broader experience than how you feel right now and what's going on in your world.
What you're saying there, effectively, Peter, is it's a very holistic approach. When you go to speak to corporations, let's say you're invited by a HR director, a people director, human resources director, or they call themselves, to talk about mental health issues in their business, do you tend to find that with some HR departments, it's kind of pushback to say, mental health is not really our issue, it's a bigger picture, go and talk to the CEO or the MD? You ever find those sort of scenarios?
Any scenario is out there. I think with the companies that I work with, a lot of the companies I work with, they understand the impact of mental health and the impact that it has on the workplace. There are plenty of statistics out there that show the impact of presenteeism, leaveism, as well as the absenteeism, staff turnover, probation period, the kind of legal implications of unfair dismissal. The numbers are staggering when you start looking at the impact that mental health has within the workplace. And what I'm trying to push within companies now around the cultural aspect is helping the CEOs and those senior executives realize that the culture of the organization is being built in their shadow, the way that they work, the way that they process information. And so then you've got the senior executives, then you've got that linking down into the managers, and the managers then creating the culture within the teams, and then the teams are outworking the culture that's being set from the top. And so until you actually begin to look at the culture as a whole organizational process, then you'll begin to see where the healthy, unhealthy cultures are, where the competition, if you like, healthy and unhealthy, is there, where the drive, again, healthy, unhealthy. If we don't ask those questions of those most senior executives or the HRs or the managers, then we will miss an awful lot of information around the impact that poor mental health is having within specific workplaces.
That's a very good point. So what inspired you the most to be successful in life?
To be successful in life? Wow. Oh, goodness me, John. For me personally, the success for me is a happy home. I have 4 boys at home. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and a wife who's trying to juggle the house in the background. And so I've begun to realize that for me anyway, family is very important. The time I get to spend with my family is important. The energy that I have to spend with my family is important. The money that I earn in order to kind of provide for my family is important. So in order for me to kind of have those moments where I feel like I'm succeeding in life, it was very much, is my family unit in a healthy, happy place? And when that works, brilliant. On the days where I have a bad dad day, kind of, it takes a bit of a knock, and I'm like, hang on, what do I need to reassess? What do I need to readjust? And quite a lot of the time, it's me going to bed early and having enough energy to deal with their energy. But yeah, I mean, success is so different for anyone and everyone, isn't it? It's about what fulfills us. Because some people will say, well, finance and money and earning loads of money or getting to that position in the job title. But back in the early 2000s, I did a project which was, what does success look like in the 21st century? And we interviewed lots of people in lots of spaces, some who you would say were the most successful people. And a lot of them replied with, I still feel like there must be more to life than this. And kind of a sense of emptiness within the success that they had created or mounted. And I think if we lose the sight of happiness, if we lose the sight of hope, and all of those kind of positive emotions, life becomes a little bit monotonous if we're not careful. And so it's a great question to begin to ask ourselves, what does success really look like? And how do I begin to not just see it as a one-off journey, but on a weekly, daily, if you like, hourly process? I have a little thing in my diary which pings up every couple of hours with some positive kind of statements. And one of them is, today I will have positive encounters with the people that I meet. And if I can do that on a regular basis and actually have positive encounters with those around me, then that's a more successful day than the days where I feel like I haven't really seen anyone or spoken to anyone. That's a very random answer to your very specific question, John.
It's fine. Well, back to 2020, we had the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, people were told, work from home. All of a sudden, people went from working in a busy open plan office to working from home. And that generated a huge amount of isolation for people. People couldn't visit their relatives, their friends. They were working from home. What sort of, when you were talking to clients and they were approaching you, what were the general maladies, I suppose you could say, or mental health issues that people were coming to you with due to this isolation?
So 2020 is a year we want to forget, isn't it? It's the statistics around it are quite fascinating. So before lockdown, 66% of the UK workforce had never worked from home before. And we then tell everyone to work from home. And it was 2022 where people were like, okay, pandemic's kind of over, let's get everyone back into the office. Let's go back for that 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And then 91% of the UK workforce said no. And the whole culture of our working world shifted and changed within those 2 years. And what we're also seeing now is that the younger workforce are much more, I need to be in the office, I need to be with people, I need to see people. I can't just be sat on my own in my bed sit and work, and recognizing the impact on their mental health. So for a lot of companies, it's the younger workforce or single workforce that want to be back in the office environment to create that connection. And then you've got young families where there's the school drop-off and the pickups and the school activities, and the hybrid working works really well in that flexibility of working around kind of that world. And so there's a lot more of the kind of 2 days a week, 3 days a week back in the office environment there. And then you've got another kind of older cohort, which again are like, hang on, no, we need to get back into the office. So it really has splintered in different industries and different kind of environments, different age groups. But you're right, the biggest things that we hit when we went through lockdown was the isolation and the loneliness. And suddenly realizing that our houses had inadvertently become prisons, and people were struggling to break away from their work. They were struggling to even get out of the house and go for a walk. There was a lot of fear about bumping into people, about going shopping. It just created an environment which fueled this kind of underlying worry, fear, doubt, concerns all the time. And I mean, the news was kind of fueling all that, and people's experiences were fueling all that. So it was a very, very tough time for a lot of people. And I think the things that were coming out of the workplace, the main questions I was getting asked were, how do we support our teams in this space? How do we create connection in an online working hybrid world? And I think that's a very, very good question to be asking. One of my companies created Clyde Days. And now they still do this now that they are back in the office. But there's a hybrid working, but they make a day, either a week or a month, I can't remember which way around it works, where everybody is expected to be in the office or to go on to a call. And they began to create the environment during the lockdown period of being on a Zoom call, and everybody was in that call. Everybody was chatting and meeting. And for some companies, they've even made the working from the office day a much more social day, not a productive day. This is a let's catch up with our team. Let's kind of have those conversations, get those coffees in, go out for lunch with people. Let's rebuild those connections that we've lost. And I think for the companies that are investing in the connection and the time in the environment where relationships can be built and be sustained, those are the companies that are thriving at the moment. Whereas the companies where somebody's coming into the work, they're working online, they don't know their team, there isn't that kind of same camaraderie even as a word of kind of feeling connected to their team. Those are the companies where those new employees are leaving the job within the 6-month probation period, or certainly within 18 months to 2 years. The staff turnover rate at the moment is unreal with how difficult it is to keep hold of people when they don't feel connected to the organization that they're working for.
Do you think that intercultural or intergenerational diversity issues are part and parcel of mental health issues in the workplace? So where for example, you have maybe older managers and a younger workforce, and there's a bit of disconnect between the two age groups. You might have late baby boomers who are senior managers, and then you have millennials who are young workforce people. And it's understanding the difference between those two generations could be causing a conflict in the workplace that's leading to mental health issues.
I'm going to say yes and no in equal measure. What a great answer that one is, John.
Yeah.
I think the cross-generational process is a very, very powerful and very, very healthy one if it is done well. Because the older generation need to learn from the younger generation, but also the younger generation need to learn from the older generation. If it's done well, it's an incredibly powerful tool. If it's done badly, then you have the older generation who are like, come on, just get on with it. Why are you creating so much issue? Why can't you do this? Why is everything? And it becomes a real negative vibe to these younger generation that's trying to understand the workplace, understand the work-life balance, understand the kind of hybrid working dynamic. And it's a very different world that young people are coming into in the working environment than kind of the 40s, 50s, 60s who have been in the working environment before COVID and the expectations that there are. And if there isn't positive engagement, then it becomes a very toxic place, for sure. Because there are the spoken and the unspoken expectations from older generations to younger generations, but also from the younger generations to the elders. But one of the most powerful videos I've ever seen is the old people's home with the play group in it, you know, and where you got these old people who would otherwise be just sat in their own space, not really engaging. And then you bring a preschool into that environment, and lo and behold, these older generation are watching the kids play, they're engaging, they're kind of reading stories, and the mental health of the older generation skyrockets in a positive place. But also the engagement of the preschool to the older generation. It's an incredibly healthy thing to explore and to create the dynamic where you are looking at the generations supporting one another. That's an incredibly healthy, positive place to be. But again, it's a very difficult one. It's one that needs to be questioned. It needs to have the conversation. It needs to have people who are driving it with the sole intent of making it a positive experience for both parties. And that means that there needs to be compromise in both places as well.
A bit of a general question here for you, Peter. Do you think that mental health issues are more prevalent in traditional type of industries as against the newer type of industries we have in the world today, like AI, machine learning, mobile app type organizations, which are very much younger organizations? So is mental health more prevalent in the traditional type of business sectors, banking, commerce?
I think we need to remember that mental health is individual based, and it's the people within those industries. Is an industry fueling for mental health? That's a tough question to put out there. I think we need to be aware of the impact of social media and our young people. I think we need to be aware of the dopamine hits that young people get when on devices. We need to also recognize that for me, I was told not to sit too close to a TV screen because my eyes would go square, which never happened for some reason. But so each generation has had kind of the extremes, you know. And I mean, then you look into the culture around drug misuse or smoking or alcohol or all those things. And now there's lots of recognized health issues around those. And therefore the government have pushed, because of the health issues and the complications that come from that, to the point where smoking in a public enclosed space has been made illegal because of the passive smoking impact. And actually by making it illegal, you eradicate the passive smoking context to the NHS and to the health system and everything like that. But with mobile phones and social media and our engagement and the mental health impacts and the dopamine hits and all of that kind of stuff, there is no government medical, we need to look out for this. We need to be careful of this. Because you've got a younger generation who are looking at it going, this is amazing. But you also, again, coming back to that generational question, you need the older generation of people to go, hold on, this isn't healthy. When I go out and I see a group of young people where none of them are talking to each other, but they're all on their phones, something in me goes, this isn't healthy. This is an unhealthy place to be. And it needs a maturity to be able to go, okay, guys, we need to stop. We need to find the brakes on this. Mobile phones in schools. Does a school need to say no? So as it becomes a policy within the school that it is right across the space, no, this is not a thing. But because then you've got nobody going, and then the peer pressure can't build because the school has simply said, no, there's a boundary, there's a space, it's safe to not have a phone. Because if you don't have that policy, then you get the peer pressure, you get the fear, you get that I'm going to miss out, you get all those other internal thought processes that are going on, because at some point somebody hasn't had the confidence to simply say, stop it, you know? And I think there are environments and there are working spaces where somebody needs to be able to look at it, ask the hard questions, but also be able to say, you know what, guys, that needs to stop. And put the boundary in place, put the policy in place, put the expectation in place, make it a conversation that is being heard and listened to. And now, if anyone's ever been in a parenting situation / management situation where you've made a judgment call and it's been a bad one, you're hoping that people will kind of kick back against it so as you can kind of find where the healthy boundary is. Because I know with my kids, I often start off with a really strict kind of no, and then they'll go, but dad. And I go, you know what, you're right. Actually, I need to lift that and find another place to put that boundary. And that's healthy, you know, and it needs to be a conversation. So different industries, different working environments, different generational contexts, John, it's all in there. If we don't have these conversations, we just don't get to ask the right questions.
You mentioned there about social media, for example. When I was young, there was no such thing as social media. And, you know, particularly with boys, less so with girls in school. And I'm being very generalistic here. Bullying tends to be more physical, like pushing lads around the place, you know, because they were weaker than you or I, or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, with the explosion of social media, like in particular, say, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and all those other social media channels, what you had was kind of cyberbullying in schools and universities, which, of course, has led to a whole, range of mental health issues where you've had young people at the very worst committing suicide because they were being bullied in school, or there was videos being put out there on social media about them as people, and their peer group saw this. So what advice do you give to parents and to young people, for example, who come to you and say, Johnny or Mary are the victims of cyberbullying in school?
What do you say? It is such a sad place, isn't it? And because if you like that really strict boundary places, you know what? Just don't give them a phone then, because then they can't access, they can't see. But the thing is, it's going on in the background, and are they missing out? What's healthy here? You know, do they see it? Do they hear it? Do they experience it? I mean, there was a situation really recently where the person was attacked and killed, and it's like if they didn't have the fueling of gaming or kind of bullying or all that kind of stuff, and you're like, how do we begin to that young people are taking their own life because of the bullying that is happening on the devices, because it just doesn't stop. It's out there, it doesn't go away, you know? And now, a little bit of a expletive processing going on here, but I heard just last week of a 12-year-old boy who had sent inappropriate images to his girlfriend through WhatsApp, and then her girlfriend was accessing WhatsApp through her dad's phone, and so all of a sudden her dad was in possession of child material and had to go to the police, had to kind of say, look, this has been sent to me, this isn't me going and searching for stuff, because, and this is the stuff that young people just don't see. They don't see it as inappropriate, they don't see it as dangerous, they don't see it as a negative kind of perspective. And so more education needs to be done about it. And I mean, my 10-year-old, year 6, a message went around the school from the school to say that inappropriate images are being shared on a group, and that parents need to be much more visible on what's being shared, what's being kind of accessed, what's being seen. And you're just like, how do you protect our kids from that? Because as soon as you give them access, what protections are we putting in place? How do we keep them safe? You know? And there are plenty of arguments about lock it down, don't give them it. You know, I'm in that space at the moment. Versus, we're never going to get rid of our phones, so we need to teach them. They need to learn how to keep themselves safe. They need to know what is appropriate, what isn't. But the problem is that as soon as you see something, you can't unsee it. As soon as you hear or witness something, you can't take that back. And so how do we keep the innocence of our young people and protect them? That's the question that we need to be asking with these, if you like, for strong language, weaponized devices that we have in our hand that are actively trying to pursue us, you know, and to absorb our time. We need to protect ourselves, we need to protect our kids, because it will consume us if we're not careful. That was a very heavy answer there, John.
Very good point. I know what you're saying there, Peter, because, you have a 10-year-old child there at the moment. They might not have a mobile phone. We'll give them another 3 or 4 years. They'll say to you, Dad, all my friends in school have got a mobile phone. I want one. And you can't make them feel the odd person out as such. It's like telling children, don't smoke. We say that to them often enough, to start smoking, so you have to, I think what you're saying there is to build trust between parents and children, that the children feel safe in going to their parents. If they have, for example, as you mentioned there a couple of minutes ago, was a person where they saw, pornography, whatever it was, on their dad's phone through a WhatsApp group message. There has to be kind of trust between the child and the parent to say that they can discuss these issues openly and deal with it appropriately, but you cannot deny people access to a phone forever and a day, because it's like everything else. If you say to a child, don't smoke, you start smoking. Don't drink, they start underage drinking, for example, So there has to be a conversation between people, parents and children. I agree with that. Good point. On a positive note, to end this conversation today, Peter, which has been very fascinating and quite deep, to be quite honest. If you were given the opportunity to have one single request that would be granted to you without question, what would that be?
Oh, wow. Gosh, one request that would be granted to me, what would it be? Okay. For me, I would like to see the education system to change. I think there are so many different ways that people learn. There are so many different ways that people are creative. There are so many different ways that people are sporty. There are so many different ways that our education is currently allowed to explore. And with the conversation neurodiversity coming out, and actually how do we help young people who don't fit the social norm to learn and to succeed, but not just succeed, but excel within their learning. I had a great thing from a lady called Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she said our brain has 7 different sections, and every thought process bounces through those 7 sections. But the order and the time that your brain spends in each of those different sections is totally unique to you, which means that nobody that has ever been and nobody that will ever be thinks the way you do. How incredibly awesome is that as a possibility? Which means that although we come to the same answers or the same kind of conclusions, the way that we've done that is totally unique to us. And yet, how do we empower young people, to excel in what they are inherently good at, what their brain, if you like, has been designed or created to be, People with incredible imagery and design and creativity and all of that, who probably went through the education system feeling like a failure because they couldn't write a sentence, or they couldn't kind of do the math equation, or they couldn't kind of get the right plate tectonics in the right order for geography. And so, but that was never what they were designed to do, if you like, and so to see people succeed, to see people unlock the full potential of what their brain can do in a healthy place, where mental health was the understanding of having more good days than bad. And what do I need to do to keep myself healthy by ensuring that every day ends in a positive place? It oversimplifies the complexity of poor mental health dramatically. But at the moment, I feel like the mental health conversation is a little bit about how do we try and avoid mental health illnesses. But I would love to see it move towards how do we ensure that we are in a positive mental healthy place on a daily basis. What does that look like? Because that would be a very healthy place to be.